Hey everyone, I'm back. For the next few videos, I wanted to start with advice for trainee pharmacists, which is the new name for pre-reg. This video is solely going to be focusing on revision books. I'm going to do a separate video on all the online resources, just because there's so many of them out there. I have been gifted some of the resources, so I will put a little gifted tag when I mention those resources. Okay, so let's start with the BNF, the Bible in the pharmacy world. It's going to be your best friend. But just like with all the other resources I'm going to mention, you don't want to rely on just one source of information. Even if it is a reliable one like the BNF, it's always better to get a couple of different resources for revision. Some are more compact and have just the key points, and some are more comprehensive. The way that I did it was started off with the high weighted topics, and then I did the medium weighted, and then I kind of did the low weighted ones, but only really gave myself like a week, and to be honest, I didn't actually cover most of the low weighted topics. I would read through each of the chapters and literally go through it page by page, but I would pay particular attention to the treatment summaries and the high risk drugs. Okay, let's bring an example page up. Here's the cardiovascular system. This is the arrhythmias treatment summary. So I had a color code. I would literally just sit down, go through these chapters, read it, make sure I'm actually paying attention whilst reading. Reading a book is not the most active form of revision, so you do need to do something alongside that. What I did alongside it was write questions on all the key points and all the small specific details that I thought I'd forget later on. And then when it came closer to the exam, I just brought up all of these questions, redid them all, and then memorized the answers. It is a really bulky book. You're probably not going to be able to cover all of it. Having said that, there are people that have covered the BNF twice before their exam, and there are other people that didn't pick up the BNF once before the exam, and both of them still passed. In terms of the MEP, which is all your law and ethics, I spent about a week going through the whole thing, and whilst going through it, I would make mind maps that I did not bring with me. But I'd make mind maps, and I made about 4 sides of an A4 sheet, and then I just used those mind maps as my references closer to the exam season, so I didn't have to go through the whole of the MEP again. But what I would recommend doing is spending about a week. It took me about a week, factoring in the fact that I was still working full-time for the week, but it took me about a week to go through everything. So I would recommend doing that earlier on, making your summary notes, and then just using your summary notes closer to the exam. So alongside the MEP, I also used the Pharmacy Law Quizzes booklet by Baba Malik, and basically it's just true, false questions. And this was, again, a way to actively recall what I was learning instead of just reading, because reading all about CD locker conditions is not that interesting. Paper 1 for the registration exam is Calcs, and personally that's always been quite a weak point. The Bonner and Wright Calcs book has been with me since the start of my pharmacy degree, 5 years. This book has been through thick and thin and is literally falling apart. I literally start from the basics every year, the real basic questions, and then work my way up to the more complicated ones. And for maths, the key is just to practice as many questions as you can. So early on in your training year, I would recommend starting with really basic questions and then building it up. Like in the months leading up to the exam, I was doing about 10 questions a week under timed conditions. And when it came up to the exam season, like imminently, I was probably doing about 40 questions a week. I also used my hospitals, Calcs questions, and my university gave us questions as well. I was also gifted this book. I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but it does contain Calcs questions in it, so Again, like I said, you just need to practice with as many questions as you can find. So moving on to the paper 2, the top 100 drugs book. I'm sure you guys have all come across this. I never actually realized this, but this book is actually made for junior doctors and med students, not actually for pharmacists, which is fine. But something that I realized was, even though they're the top 100 commonly used medicines or medicine groups, they're not necessarily the same as the high-risk drugs that the GPHC consider. The GPHC have their own set of drugs and drug groups that you will definitely be asked a question on, and they are not all covered in here, and they're definitely not all covered in as much detail as you probably need to know them in. Having said that, it is a really good book to take to work and use for studying. This book does a really good job of highlighting which adverse effects and which interactions are important for that drug. Going back to this book, it's the Pharmacy Registration Assessment Questions by Nadia Bukhari. I was gifted this book. If you have RPS membership, there's the whole collection available, I think, as PDFs or online, so you don't necessarily have to buy it. But I definitely found it useful. One of the key things in revising for the exam is to go through as many exam style questions as you can, and that's what this book is full of. It's also written by different pharmacists, so that it's not all coming from one person, which I think was really good. The other thing I liked about this was that it had paper 1 and paper 2 questions. It also had a rationale for all of them. So one thing I would recommend is any resources you're using, make sure the answers have rationales. Otherwise, you're not going to learn that much from doing the questions. As a hospital pre-reg, I found over-the-counter medicines the hardest topic to cover. So this is kind of how I went about it. What I would recommend doing is buying a study guide. You can buy these from these like online resource providers. The one that I got was from Pre-Reg Pharmacist. To be honest, I wouldn't personally recommend it. There was a lot of missing information. And I guess with this exam, it is one of those exams where you're never going to be able to know everything. But I personally would have preferred something a little bit more comprehensive. However, I would recommend buying something like this just so you have a starting base. I would go through this booklet, but then whilst going through the topics, I would compare the notes to another resource. So that might be the BNF or the CKS. I also found it really useful practicing this kind of stuff with my friends who were doing their pre-reg in community, and also just with pre-reggers who were using different notes, because you could kind of just share the different bits of information you've learned. This one would maybe get like a 2 stars out of 5 because I had to research a lot of the information, as you can see. Another resource that I used for my OTC revision is the Rutter Community Pharmacy book. I'm sure you guys have all seen this, but it basically just has lots of colourful tables, diagrams, photos. It also has like case studies that you can go through. So yeah, I recommend this book. I think I've seen online versions of it, like online PDFs. However, I'm not sure how legal they are, so we'll just end that there. One of the other things that I did for my OTC revision was use this quiz book. Again, it's just a true-false quiz book. It's nothing really complicated, but it's another way to actively revise instead of just reading. So I found it really useful, and these books are literally like £5. So guys, that's it. Those were the books that I used to help me with the registration exam. I'm going to make a separate video on all the online resources that I used. You can split the resources into like 2 types. You've got things like the BNF, the MEP, my OTC revision guide, which is the content-based resources, and then you've got the question-based resources, which are there for you to like put your knowledge into practice. And I really recommend making sure you have both types of resources. Again, just to emphasize what I mentioned before, it's really important to get a mixture of resources, some that are a bit more difficult, some that are a bit simpler, some that are content-based, some that are question-based. really try and get as many resources as you can and get a good variety of them, because that's what's going to help you the most with passing the exam, which I'm sure all of you guys are going to do. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below, and if you have already done the registration exam, did you use any other books? Leave them in the comments below as well, and thanks for watching. Okay, quickly. Let's quickly get a thumbnail before my camera dies on me again. What am I doing? There's going to be a lot of jump cuts of me cutting out my coughing. It started already. Oh god. The thing is, my life is just so busy right now. I know if I don't film now, I just won't get a chance. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. For Calcs, I've left the book. Oh god, I've left the book. Hopefully you guys still stick around. The resources. Big insect is outside, so it's all good. Over here. Or here. Somewhere. Otherwise, well, that's it, isn't it?